In Overwatch, nothing can be more frustrated than constantly getting countered. You start with a good game playing your main and start popping the hell off, but then 1, 2, 3 people start counterpicking you and it feels like there's nothing you can do to win that game. So you go run to swap, but you're playing a character that you just don't think you can carry on nearly as hard as your main. But what if I told you there was ways that you could still get value without actually swapping at all? There's ways to never lose to your counter. We're gonna break it all down, but do me a solid and smash the like, subscribe, and let's jump in. Now, the first thing that you need to identify right off the bat is how is your character getting countered in the first place? What exactly is the problem that they're trying to deal with or solve by swapping to said character? Is their character really good at killing you? Like they're swapping Sombra when you're popping off on Zen? Is their character really hard to kill on your character? So maybe in the beginning, you were a Genji popping off against an Ana, but then they swap to a Brig or a Moira, and it's a lot harder for you to be aggressive. Or perhaps it's a character that stops you from being effective, like a diva constantly punishing you if you're out of position as a hit scan. Basically, it's important to not just know that something counters you, it's important to understand why and how they counter you. Because if you know that, you know how you could adapt your play to still get value on the character that you're maining. Then once you've figured out exactly why the opponent is swapping to that character, what they plan to do to you, and how they directly affect you, you can do a couple of different things. And the first thing that you can do is find value in another way. And what I mean by that is specifically find value in the way that they are not able to interact with. So let's just say, hypothetically, you're Zenyatta and they're swapping to Sombra because that person is really, really good at killing you, right? And that's what they plan to do. They plan to swap Sombra and kill you all freaking game. But all that means is you just need to slightly change up your play, position more safely, position closer to natural cover, position closer to your teammates, and yes, this is going to make you a bit less effective at doing what you were normally doing in the neutral. You're not able to take an off angle or frag out nearly as hard, but you're denying an entire swap from the enemy team just by changing your play, because you got to realize that if they swap to something with the goal to kill you as like their way to shut you down and you just deny it, even if you're less effective on average, you're still going to be getting a lot of value just by doing that alone, and that's super important for you to recognize. Now, to give you the other example, let's just say they swap to something that is just really hard for you to kill now. You're Genji, you're getting a lot of value because you're able to consistently go in, swoop up their supports, and get out, right? And you're carrying fight after fight, but now they're swapping to things that just make it way too difficult. What do? Well, one of the things that you have to understand is with everything gained, there's something given. And what I mean by that is perhaps they were actually playing Ana, and maybe that Ana was able to get aggressive nades, just pop off with Nano, have a fight win condition that activated when she nanoed the Zarya or nanoed the Ramatra or whatever the case may be, and because you're killing her consistently, now she has to swap off, she has to play Brig, and she's no longer able to do all those other things. But if you keep trying to go for these aggressive kills on this Brig and then you die and feed, you become her win condition. You will all the win condition she needs. She gave up the nanoing aggressively, she gave up the proactive nades, but now she has you feeding in the goddamn backline because that's what she planned for. So you got to understand that simply by pulling back, adapting, and making sure that just her swapping alone is not going to give them the win condition. That's incredibly important because they're sacrificing all these things, plus they probably would have preferred to play their main as well, and they're swapping to try to counter you, but you're not playing their game. This just means that you need to get out of the autopilot mindset. You're no longer playing the character the same all the time. Take a note when people are specifically interrupting what you're doing, right? If you're constantly going and doing the same thing over and over again, and all of a sudden they're swapping up those characters, there's typically a reason for that, and you need to be patient and look to adapt your play as well. Now, you might be like, Mills, this doesn't always work. Sometimes they're just completely hard shutting me down. Sometimes there's characters that I can't even interact with, like Farah Mercy. What do I possibly do to win this game? And another thing that you can do is actually deal with people through proxy. And what I mean by that is, let's say as a tracer, all of a sudden they swap to something that is hard for you to deal with, a hard matchup, a hard duel, whatever the case may be. Oftentimes, you don't have to directly challenge the thing that is countering you. Oftentimes, if there is like a Farah Mercy that you can't interact with, you do not have to interact with them. And you might be like, well, if I don't do something about them, I'm going to lose. It's not your job to deal with everything. It's not your job to individually shut down all the problems on the enemy team. And it's definitely not your job to directly challenge the things that counter you or that you have a hard time interacting with. Most of the time, if you apply pressure in other places, then you're going to allow your team to be able to hard focus on the things that you have problems dealing with more, because you're dealing with the other things that maybe they have problems with. And another way to deal with things through proxy is to enable directly the teammates that have the best shot at dealing with X problem, right? So let's say you're playing Brig and there's a Far Mercy and you can't do anything to the Far Mercy. You feel absolutely useless. Now, you could just go back and swap and maybe just be forced off the characters that you main, but there could be a lot of other characters that are, on the battlefield that you're good against. Maybe there's a Wrecking Ball that you're really good against, and if you swap off, you're not able to keep that person in check. So what can you do? Well, you look around, you find your Ana, you find your other hit scan DPS, and you say, I'm going to utilize the vast majority of my resources to defend that person. I'm going to shield them off, I'm going to trigger Inspire to help them, I'm going to save my packs for them. And the idea here is that, yeah, alone, you are completely garbage against the Far Mercy. You can't do anything. But together, if you use your impact, all of your value, and funnel it into somebody else that actually can do something, you can actually deal with the problem through proxy. And you can do this in a lot of different situations where you're just trying to all of a sudden enable. All of a sudden, you are popping off against the enemy. They swap to something that shut you down. You're like, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and enable someone else on my team now, and they can deal with you. So you're still finding a way to be effective and get value, but doing it in a way that's not direct, because directly you are not that great in the matchup, or you just don't have a lot of good ways to interact, but you could always help your team. And by the way, there's other ways to enable teams besides just healing them. You can also create space for them. You can also challenge other DPS that might try to clear them from the high ground. As an example, if I'm a Genji and I can't do anything against a Far Mercy, I'm still not going to let the other Hanzo on the enemy team take the high ground, because he gets as light of sight against my freaking hit scan. And if my hit scan gets smoked by the Hanzo, he can't deal with the Far Mercy. So these are all things that are super important. If you can't directly deal with the problem, you can find ways to still get value. And if you still can't get value, you can find ways to deal with things through proxy. But there are situations where you can't find any way to deal with something through proxy. You can't find any way to be effective enough to win the game. And that's why sometimes it's actually correct to swap. And I'm not going to say it's never correct to swap, but I will tell you that if you're someone that swaps way too easy, especially if you swap before you try to do all these things first, you are really doing yourself a disservice at getting good at your character. And I find way too many people that I coach, they often run away or they swap way too quickly the second they deal with any sort of opposition. They see one character that they have even a slight problem dealing with on their character of choice, and they swap. And this just means that you're not very flexible, you're not very adaptable, and you're just not going to be able to get the impact that other people that are willing to endure and adapt through the same situations are. Anyways, if you have any major questions for me, definitely let me know in the comments down below, and check out my private coaching if you want some special help. Links will be in the description. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you next time.